strange experience I had. This happened to me and my husband a month or so ago. We decided to go to an outlet on Native American ground, and it was only 10 minutes from our house. We went and played at the arcade and looked at some of the stores, like we normally would. After a while, I suggested to go to a small convenience store inside the outlet. We went inside, and my husband said he felt a strong pain in his abdomen and felt very uncomfortable near the store. I decided to stay a little longer. This woman came out of the back of the store and started looking at the merchandise with her arms crossed. I assumed she was a worker, but she didn't greet us or even look at us. She gave me a very weird and uncomfortable feeling, so we decided to leave the store and sat on a bench nearby, where my husband said he was afraid the woman put a curse on us or some of the food products. I shrugged and didn't mind it until I saw the same woman leave the store, look around, and go back inside. It set me off a bit because I was afraid she was looking for us. We decided to move to sit by the fountain while we asked for my husband's mom, who picks us up. He doesn't have a car of his own, and we only have one car that works. We start talking like usual, and I begin to calm down. All of a sudden, my husband looks shocked, and I turn around, and dozens of crows started flying around and circling the convenience store. All of a sudden, I feel this horrible, evil presence coming from the store, and I start crying so hard that my husband has to comfort me. I couldn't explain it. That was the first time I felt that afraid before. Pretty soon after the birds disappeared, and my mother-in-law picks us up, we told her what had happened, and she said she had a horrible feeling right before we called her and picks us up, and so did my father-in-law. When we get home, my mother-in-law started burning herbs and cleansing the house. And when me and my husband get ready to take a shower, he realized his period started. He's trans, female to male. This freaked us both out pretty badly. Since then, nothing has really happened, but I refuse to go there. I want to know if anyone might know what that was all about. My mother-in-law said it might be witchcraft, and I had the strange feeling that the woman in the store wasn't even human. Evil entity in the corner of my room. So this happened about 2 years ago. I was in a really bad spot, mentally speaking. I was really cranky, in such a bad humor, and really sad altogether. I'm usually a very cheerful and friendly person, so this was totally out of character for me. Was this depression or something alike? I don't know, as I never went to get help or diagnosed. But I hope I never go through this again. To make this point short, I eventually snapped out of this and started feeling better. My dog always sleeps in my bed, and she usually just falls asleep immediately once she's on it. But following my snapping out of my mental ordeal, and for like 2 consecutive nights, she wouldn't sleep at all and stay awake with her eyes fixed to the corner of my room. The first night, I didn't make much of it, and I just went to sleep as usual. The second day, though, her anxiety went off the roof. She started glaring again at said corner, and this time she started growling, something my dog never does. I would tell her to stop and try to get her distracted from that corner by putting her to the other side of the bed, getting her under the sheets, but nothing worked. She eventually just go to that unusual behavior. At one point, I stood up and carried her to that corner as to show her that there was nothing there. While I was walking there, my dog started barking and crying, terrified as I've never been or seen her before, feeling as if I was about to deliver her to the devil himself. At this point, I stopped and felt chills all over my body. I felt an evil presence in that corner that was observing us. This time, terrified, I went back to my bed, turned on the TV and lights, and continued observing my dog as she was the only one who could see that entity in the corner. I'm sure for whatever that entity was, it was really tall, as my dog could always fix her eyes almost to roof level. I felt observed all night by this entity in the corner. I felt an evil intent through its glare. I don't know why I didn't leave the room. I think I was just terrified of standing up. I didn't sleep that night. I believe that this entity was feeding from, or even causing, my moodiness and sadness, and once I got better, it just left as if I had no purpose further for it. After the second night, the entity did not reappear. I hope it never does. What happens when your guardian angel leaves you? And I have a few questions I have left. This happened when I was about 2 or 4 years old. For context, I was a chill baby. Loved sleeping and watching cartoons. I was my parents' only child at the time. My mother is a teacher and my dad is a farmer. I'd spend my days with my auntie, she babysat me, while mom and dad worked, often playing outside with the animals and sticks. I had no neighbors for miles, but I didn't really feel lonely, as I was a very imaginative kid. Imagine how scary it was for my parents when my episodes started. This is how it'd go about. I'd be sound asleep around midnight. Suddenly, with my eyes open and a blank stare, I would scream and scream non-stop. No one could wake me up. They would shake me, slap me. I'm Latina, throw some water, but nothing worked. Eventually, my dad settled for holding tightly until the screaming ceased. This would last about 15 minutes, and it was every single night. They tried a lot of things. Called a Catholic priest to bless the home. My midnight mayhem stopped for about 2 weeks, but then started again. Eventually, my mom complained about it at school to one of her coworkers. This lady's what you might call a spiritual person, and she was concerned. Eventually, those episodes stopped. My mom at some point casually mentioned to that coworker how it hadn't happened in a while. And that's when the lady told my mom, I know, I did something about it. Apparently, she wrote a letter to some knowledgeable spiritual person or something. It's hard to explain, even in my native language, honestly. And they had responded to her that my guardian angel was turning his back on me. Exact words. And they did something, don't know what, that fixed it. I've never had any episodes since then. I honestly don't remember what I was seeing or dreaming about. It's really weird, because Dad said I had my eyes open the whole time and wouldn't even blink. So I don't really know if I was dreaming, hallucinating, or anything like that. I remember gaining consciousness and feeling tired. Dad pressing me about what the nightmare was about. I couldn't remember a thing. I also remember after the episode stopped, I once had a nightmare and my mom and dad were really concerned that the thing had come back. But I felt it was different because I remember the nightmare and was easily woken up. I think my parents were just tired and didn't want to go through it again. That being said, I have a few questions. Was that lady bullshitting me? Has anyone ever heard of such a thing? And if guardian angels really are a thing, was he turning his back on me literally or leaving me? Like, was the guy distracted or was he done? Why would a guardian angel leave a child? And what kind of spell or ritual could they do to prevent that? Because really, it worked. Whatever that lady did, it really worked. I know this might sound outlandish and silly, but you guys don't know anything about that kind of stuff. I'd like to know more. Also, if there's a reasonable, non-paranormal explanation for this, I'd like to know. I think my house is haunted, but I'm not quite sure. A few days ago, probably 2 days ago, I was bent over the floor. I was picking up some trash that had fallen on my floor from my trash can. My headphones are in, and I'm listening to music. The music wasn't very loud, so I could still hear what was going on around me. As I'm picking up the trash, I feel a few footsteps on the ground. You know how you feel footsteps if they're close enough? Just like that. I didn't hear anything, but I felt as if someone had ran towards me from behind. As soon as I feel the footsteps, I turn around to see if anyone was there. Nobody was there, and my door was untouched. As I mentioned earlier, I was able to hear my surroundings. I will also mention that in my parents' bathroom, there are 2 mirrors facing each other, which I know is rumored to be a type of ghost portal or something. I've also seen shadows in the corner of my eyes when I'm home alone. There's also this feeling of being watched whenever I'm the only one awake in the house. I swear there's a shadow man in my kitchen. I've seen something tall staring at me when I go use the bathroom. I don't know if I'm crazy or if my house is actually haunted. My parents dismiss it, so maybe I'm freaking out over nothing. The Curse of the Faceless Woman. A couple weeks ago, I published a story here about my experience with a paranormal entity. After thinking it over, I think there was more to the story that needs to be added. This story starts around the 25th of December. I was enjoying a trip with my family to Santa Barbara. For a day trip, and because I'm a big museums nerd, I convinced everyone to go to Solvang, a Danish town in the middle of rural California. While going down the street, we were passed by a street view car for Google. Right in front of us was a couple in their 20s. One had dyed hair. I continued on with my day. A few days later, the trip ends, and I start to head back home. As we're getting into the windy country road, at about 5 in the morning, way before the sun went up. On the side of the last suburban street, before hours of abandoned highway, was a white figure. Under a lone light lamp for a lady, she slouched slightly. She had pale skin. She had scraggly hair. But weirdest of all, the complete lack of a face. I was a little freaked out by this, and I didn't want to wait and deal with the drivers of New Year's Eve. Soon, thick fog set in, and I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. This road was very windy, as there was a valley below. About 10 minutes of driving, the road started turning, and every few feet was a sign saying what to do, slowly getting more nonsensical. From rock warnings back to signs saying to turn off all lights, to signs saying just stop. After a couple minutes, everything returned to normal. My theory is that there is a transitional space, and I've changed universes. Today I went to an ice cream shop, and on a whim decided to check if I was on Google Maps. I opened it up and went to the bakery I had just gone out of when the car passed by. There was the person with dyed hair, and everything else was normal. But I and my family who were traveling with me were gone. I checked the dates, the images, only a month old. This explains a bit. The day after, I was staying in a hotel, and all the lights went out for hours. And these people, quite close to civilization, were fine with it. They acted as if this was completely normal. Yet mere months earlier, the city would have been a mess if power went out, as it did, but only for a couple minutes. It shut all of the casinos for a bit. Now they were all back up by the time I left the building. Wow. Did you ever connect to the boys' appearance to the typical gray alien? We used to live in a haunted house as well, full of crackling noises that my parents would say, because the house was old. And eventually, since they accepted this idea, it just got worse and worse. until there was literally people walking downstairs when everybody had gone upstairs. But I didn't buy this idea. My room was haunted, and I had something grunting loudly right next to my ear one night, which had me in such fear that I was paralyzed and completely unable to move. Another time, it sounded as if the floor in my room suddenly flooded with what sounded like little rats or giant spiders. It was unexplainable, and my parents would get angry at me if I woke them up. And they thought I was full of shit. This time was a terrible time in my life because I was so incredibly scared in this room. Looking back at it, I was such a fool to even live there with them. Anyways, the cracking and the stepping escalated to the point that even the biggest fool couldn't explain it off as something else. At which point, my atheist parents had a change of mind and decided to try calling in a Catholic priest to perform a deliverance ritual on the house. Lo and behold, after this, it all ceased completely. Even the small cracks, because of the old house thing, were gone completely and permanently. Many years later, I began to having dreams about characters with frail bodies and big eyes. They would come intensely into my dreams and call themselves beings of light. The dreams or experience would be so intense that they would even remain for a short time after I had woken up. I began dreaming of UFOs as well, all the more intensely until the moment I decided to seek God through Christ, in which all of this went away completely. The same month that I decided to start playing and believing in God, I actually had 2 separate UFO sightings. I've never seen a UFO in my life, nor really believed in them. When my friend died of an overdose, it was 2 days later. A few close friends were together in my parents' apartment, where he had spent all the day. He died hanging out while talking his plans for working through his depression, playing guitar, and genuinely being his best self. His best friend and brother were viewing the body at a morgue at that time, which we all advise him not to do. We were sitting around the apartment, quietly grieving together. One friend playing guitar, just sort of improvising over the general mood. Suddenly, the whole energy in the room shifts down, the sound of the guitar with it. There's a tension, a darkness, a frantic anxiety, fear, confusion in the air. My partner, who is a more visual kind of person, claimed she could see him pacing around the apartment, from the kitchen to the chair he was playing guitar in, to the living room with us, just frantically connecting with these memories and bonds. My friend on the couch next to me, who works in hospice and connects with death on a regular basis, grabbed my hand. It felt like she was slipping away. Her hand was freezing cold. I grabbed her harder, tried to hold her back, and the life and warmth of her arm, I felt scared. The tension was high. The guitar was weird. It felt like a fucked up dream, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Then I realized that cold, distant feeling wasn't scary. It didn't feel good or right, but I loosened my grip and I let my attention follow that deep, absent feeling up her arm. Suddenly, I myself could feel him in the room, like we were so close, locked in an engaging conversation. I could feel his anxiety and fear and regret and deep sadness reverberating in a confusing swirl. I imagined settling it all down, holding him tight by the shoulders and grounding him. I focused my energy on him and told him that it was okay, we would be fine. He would live through us. No one blames him. We all carry compassion and nothing but love. Then another wave of anxiety, feelings of his best friend. I promised him we would take care of him. I said, "You're on your own journey now, dude. I think you have work to do. We love you. We'll be okay. Go explore and move on whatever's next. See you around." Then I felt like I was back in my body and let go of my friend's hand. Was suddenly aware of the guitar had stopped, and we were all simultaneously back together in the room again, just looking at each other. Didn't say anything for a few minutes, but processed it together later. Corroborated each other's experiences from that moment. Everyone had a slightly different piece, some more direct or emotional, or visual than others. I'd been an empirical but agnostic person, and I'd never experienced or imagined anything like that before or since. Gave me a lot to think about, and I'm still processing it. Read the Tibetan Book of the Dead since then, and it's given me an incredible model to contextualize the moment. I started noticing little things at first, but decided to experiment with not taking them for granted. Like all those moments in a good conversation where you think, I was just about to say that. Realize it happens all the time when you're really engaged in listening. 2. I was sitting around with my friend smoking a spliff in the woods. My friend next to me was thirsty, so I handed her my water bottle. She says, "Oh, thanks." Takes a beat. Wait, did I say anything out loud? Everyone says no. She's like, I was just about to ask if anyone had anything to drink. I think, that was very specific. Going to keep following this thread. Experiment with accepting as a fact that some amount of our thoughts and intentions are transmitted. Shit got real. Tripping on a half a tab of acid with my girlfriend at the time. We were at a rough point in our relationship, very codependent and actively failing. At one point, it seemed like our shared problems coalesced into a separate entity, like a greasy, dark orb of blame, shame, frustration, fear. But for some reason, only one of us had it at a time, leaving the other to embrace their best independent self, a common feeling on acid. That person would be socializing with our friends, communicating freely and confidently, while the other bore the full emotional burden of our issues, paralyzed and anxious. Then suddenly, the greasy darkness would fall out and slip into the other person, and the roles would switch. We were in a hammock together while this is happening, but at one point, when I was good, I got up to pee and she did too. She walked away off maybe 30 feet into the woods and sat down, facing away from me. I'm chatting with our friends and suddenly I'd known she's crying. I can feel the deep, wet, heavy feeling of it in my heart. I had compassion for her. I knew what all those feelings meant. We weren't good for each other. Things probably wouldn't last much longer. Anyway, my back was to hers and hers to me. Eventually, on the walk back out of the woods, we finally felt free of the darkness and started talking it through. Except the conversation was happening somewhere overhead, and everyone else with us said we were dead silent until we got back to the car. Once we got back to our apartment and were coming down, we corroborated this whole experience. I was more fascinated, saw it as an opportunity to maybe make things better. She was more avoidant, but she confirmed everything. The swapping darkness, her walking off to cry, the details of the conversation on the way back. Okay, that was a lot. That was a life-changing and deeply bizarre moment. Paradigm shift for me. No doubts left. This is a thing. Only thing to do is to try to understand the phenomenon and practice making it happen again. Early on dating, my now wife, connecting really deeply, spending a lot of time together, sharing life stories, etc. We're in that quiet, intimate moment after sleeping together, and I had my hand on her chest, feeling her breath, feeling just safe, warm, comfortable, welcomed, safe, home. My eyes were closed, and I got a flash of an image of a house. Whatever house, normal imagery. So I tell her, I just really feel at home with you. Even in this shitty apartment, I haven't felt this secure in a long time. She says, that's exactly what I was thinking. In fact, I had it deep in my memory to even find the last time I felt this way. I think it was at such and such house that I lived in with my mom after parents divorced. I remember the image of the house that flashed in my mind. Was it by any weird chance a red house with the sidewalk running past it and 2 steps up to the door with one of those little roofs over the front door? It was. She had never mentioned it, didn't even have a picture of it in her apartment. Dreams with my wife. On 3 occasions, we've shared dreams in some capacity. One time, we just both woke up, start having had dreams about being in a shipwreck, like an old wooden sailing ship destroyed and burning, with us left floating on debris in the water. Another time, we woke up and I started laughing. I said, "You were in my dream, and it was so silly. You would have loved it. We had a house together on the ocean." And she's like, "Weird. Farm animals." She lights up, says, like, "Oh, weird furry little fuzzy dinosaur critters at her old weird farmhouse on the beach?" Exactly like that. Weird little fuzzy dino critters. I have other stories like this. I think part of it has to do with the physical and emotional closeness, the force of compassion and empathy, but less so physical closeness, because when she was on a trip across the world in Tibet, I still shared a moment. I just got a huge, strong feeling that I felt her. I wrote down the time and date that it happened, and the next time she was able to contact me, I confirmed that she was having the most powerful moments in her life in some cave temple in the Himalayas, like the guru on the top of the mountain trope. Okay, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Hope you find my stories interesting, and maybe they can help you and open your mind and realize that we all have incredible superpowers. The trick is openness, listening to yourself as much as your ears, and directing your attention towards empathy and compassion and selflessness in the moment. I should add, I'm not some super spiritual being, larger than life, dedicated to practice, or on drugs all the time. I work 9 to 5. I've had a pretty average life, haven't touched psychedelics in years. Most of these experiences were dead sober, although I definitely communicate with my dogs when I'm stoned. My point being, I think everyone is capable in tuning in like this and should feel empowered to try. When I was about 7 or 8, my family moved into a house in Toronto that was 100% haunted. The first time I stepped foot in that house was when I checked it out with my parents and the realtor. Immediately, it felt off. I wouldn't say it was like I had eyes on me, but more like the sensation you get when you know you're being eavesdropped on. While my parents were chatting with the realtor, I went to check out the basement. It was unfinished and just plain creepy, but against my better judgment, I went down anyway. At the bottom of the stairs was a door, so I just went to open it. As I reached out, this little voice in my head told me not to open it and to turn around and run. I ran back up those stairs as far as I could and felt like something was on my heels the whole way. Years later, I mentioned the story to my mom, and she said that the room was the creepiest thing she'd ever seen. It was literally just an empty walk-in closet with a toilet in the corner. No light fixture, no other plumbing, just pitch black concrete room with a toilet. The whole time we lived in that house, I felt like I had eyes on me. Another time, for my birthday, I had a sleepover. That night we were playing hide and seek, and all my friends decided to open up the playground to the basement. I didn't want to seem like a wuss, so I didn't mention how creepy it was down there. Me and 2 friends were hiding in the laundry area, and we could hear other beings found upstairs, and the door to the top of the stairs was still closed. Then we heard another door in the basement creak open and closed, and the sound of bare feet walk into the middle of the room. The sound of bare feet or socked feet, it obviously was different. But we couldn't see anyone. My one friend freaked out and bolted, and we ran after him, not wanting to be left down there by ourselves. He cried and cried until his mom came to pick him up. I don't know if he saw anything. Towards the end of living there is when I actually saw something paranormal. My brother had a habit of going to sleep on a couch on the first floor and leaving the door open. Just a quick description of the upstairs for the sake of the story. As you come up the stairs, you turn right, and in front of you is the bathroom. Next to that, a linen closet. Then my brother in my bedroom, and on the right side of the hallway was a walk-in storage closet, which is where I stored all of my toys. Then at the end of the hallway was my mom's room. Unbeknownst to my young mind was because my parents split, which is why my dad's bedroom was down on the first floor. Anyway, one night I woke up around 3 a.m. and saw that my brother was gone and the door was wide open. Then I saw a shadow walk past my door from the bathroom toward my mom's room. It's probably just my mom, I thought. Then another walked past. Oh, that must be my brother going to sleep with my mom. Then another. That can't be my dad. They definitely haven't shared a bed in a long time. Then another and another. And these shadows paced up and down the hall for what felt like forever, until I saw the sun creeping up over the horizon, and I was able to fall back asleep when the adrenaline started to fade. In the morning, as soon as I woke up, I went to tell my mom what happened because obviously I was freaked out. When I walked out my door, I heard a girl crying to my left, toward my toy room in my mom's room. I thought it was my mom. I checked the toy room, nothing. Checked my mom's room and under the bed, nothing. She was downstairs making breakfast, and she saw she wasn't crying about anything. The house was messed up. Dude, my job actually had me in that old neighborhood recently, so I went to go check it out. It's been torn down, and newer luxury homes, borderline mansions, have taken over the neighborhood. That area always had money, but they've definitely increased their wealth significantly in the 25 plus years since I moved. I'm getting off topic. Yeah, she was quite the piece of work. My mother was the youngest of 13 children. All siblings flew the coop as soon as they could to get away from their mother. My mother wasn't as fortunate as my grandmother, mentally and physically. Fucked with her for years, shot and killed her beloved pony in front of her when my mom was about 10 or so, just because she could. My mom has never seen a shrink, but she should have, because my brothers and I figured out our mom was schizophrenic with 3 distinctive personalities. Let me tell you, my life growing up was not all fun and games. My mother was and is obsessive over me, as I'm her only friend. Anyway, so my grandmother lived with us for a few years when I was a little kid. I don't remember much other than the fear I had when my parents would leave the house and it would be my grandmother and just me and my brother. She hated us for some reason. Anyway, something happened to where my parents finally put her in a nursing home over in Tucker, Georgia. Can't remember the name of it. She was there for a few years until it was shut down and she was moved to a nursing home over outside Atlanta. It was off Briarcliff Road, and funny enough, just a block or so away was an insane asylum or place for mental patients. Again, this was 46 years ago. So my mom and I were driving my grandmother when I was 12. We went every Sunday to see her. The new place didn't believe in drugging their patients. Even though it was noted that my grandmother was criminally insane, I don't recall how she was given that diagnosis before she tried to kill me. Anyway, so we arrived and my mother is talking to the nurses while I walk ahead and go to the room to see our grandmother. The bitch was waiting on us. I walked in the room and the door slammed shut. I don't recall if it was locked or if it was her standing in front of the door, blocking it so I couldn't be opened. Having locks on the door wouldn't make sense. Anyway, there's my grandmother, and she grabs me by the neck and shoves me against the wall by the door, lifts me up off the ground by my neck. She is strangling me, and I'm unable to break free. I was able to use my right hand to bang against the door, and thank God my mother and nurse heard. I was passing out due to lack of oxygen. When the door burst open, one of the nurses with this big burly woman, and she kicked that door open and got in there to save me. The nurse restrained my grandmother and was able to get a syringe of something, a sedative, and inject to calm her down so where they could get her back into bed. My mother got to me and carried me out of the room and held me in her arms. She was crying and cussing them out. But after that, my grandmother was drugged like there was no fucking tomorrow. Blessedly, she passed away a few months later, and my mom became a new person, no longer controlled by her mentally and physically abusive mother. I, however, have never been comfortable around the elderly, as I'm nervous I'm going to be attacked, and I do not like to have my neck touched. I still flinch to this day if someone touches my neck. When I was in high school, I got a Ouija board with some friends. We tried it a few times at my house, and nothing of note ever happened. One night, I brought it to a friend's house. We'd call him Jay. We asked if there was a spirit present. Yes. We asked its name. X. We thought that was a weird name, so we asked again. It just goes with the letter X. After a few more innocuous questions, we asked how he died. Murder. Then one of our friends, the genius, asks, "Hey X, would never try to hurt us, right?" Long pause. Then the dial just goes back and forth to H and A repeatedly. Ha 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 ha. Anyways, we got freaked out, but kind of figured one of the group was fucking with us. I let Jay keep the board for years, and about 8 years later, when we had forgotten about it, I moved into an apartment with him after college. We have a housewarming, and some other friends, some of whom we knew in high school, find the Ouija board and his things. They start to play. Him and I are sat at the table with one group of friends. Another group is at the coffee table playing the Ouija. They ask if there's a spirit. Yes. Now I listen closely. They ask how the spirit came into this place. Murder. Then they ask his name. Ask Jay. That's weird. Jay laughs and says he doesn't hang out with many spirits. Silence for a minute. Then one of the players goes, "Oh, that's a weird name." He said X, but like spelled out. ECKS. Jay and I both immediately remember our youngest days playing it and freaked out. He burned the Ouija board later that week. We never touched one again. I don't smoke, and I don't have any friends who do, but I keep several ashtrays at home, just in case. So one day about a year ago, I was looking for some papers and found one of those ashtrays in one of those cupboards. It was completely empty and quite clean. By the way, I was pretty busy that day, so instead of putting the ashtray back in the cupboard, I just lay it on the kitchen table and went to do some repair work in the garage. I returned inside the house about an hour later, and the ashtray, still laying in the kitchen table, was filled with cigarette ash. No cigarette butts, just ash. I felt a faint scent of cigarette smoke in the house. Definitely not as strong as I would have expected, judging by the amount of ash. Like I said, the ashtray was definitely empty and clean when I found it and put it on the table. I took a kitchen knife and carefully searched the entire house. Nobody was there. I checked all the doors and windows. They were locked. Then I searched the house again, checking was there any cash valuables missing, but it was all there. I called all my friends, even non-smokers, and asked them, did they happen to drop by my house that day? They all said no. I also inspected locks for damage, but there didn't appear to be any. I changed the locks, just in case, and had trouble sleeping for days afterwards. I actually stored the ash into a bag, and I still keep it in the drawer, just in case, though I doubt it'll actually resolve or prove anything. The day after that bizarre incident, a murder took place in my neighborhood. A mentally disturbed girl with a history of drug abuse stabbed a convenience store cashier to death, following an argument over a pack of cigarettes. It is very likely unrelated, but sometimes I wonder. I don't keep spare keys in the yard, in the front yard or anything like that, in case anyone is wondering. I have a few, I guess, I'll tell the haunted apartment story though, since it's the most comprehensive. This was during college. On Halloween, I took a pendulum to an old battlefield with my friends to try to communicate with spirits or whatever, all in good fun. After that night, crazy shit started happening to me in my apartment. The first sign was my keys continuously went missing. I'd unlock the door, set my keys down, go about my business, and then they would just be gone. Even when I was alone in the house, I enlisted my friends once to search the entire house. We looked under my mattress, moved all the furniture, dug around the couches. I had about 4 sets of keys go missing. Then my door started slamming. I'm a skeptical person, so I tested everything. I checked the hinges, opened and shut the front door to see if the airflow triggered it. Nothing. My bedroom door would just slam shut on me every so often. I left for a week on vacation. When I came back, my picture of Jesus I kept on my dresser was on the floor, face down. There were stabs all over his face, like someone poked holes all through it. I took a storytelling class. Our assignment was to tell a ghost story, so as I was practicing in the dining room alone, a full water bottle that was sitting on the island flung itself off the table violently. I had a friend move in with me, and after all that, all the weird stuff stopped. Epilogue. It was my final day at my apartment. I had all my friends over as a final farewell to the first year of college. One of my friends was like, "What's this?" "There's something in your couch." And he pulled out a set of my keys. Everyone immediately started feeling around the couch, and every set of keys was in my couch. It's like my poltergeist was saying goodbye as well. Two friends, we'll call them Sid and Net, and I were wandering about one night in the dead of winter. This takes place a bit past the end of my dad's dead-end road. The road ends and tapers off into a dirt and grass pathway that leads all the way to a creek bank that used to have a bridge running over it. The bridge was long gone, but we loved exploring that creek. The three of us were wading along, chilly water up to our ankles. Thank God for waterproof boots. In this creek, it has steep banks on either side, ones you have to be very careful to get down or get up. We're wandering along in almost total darkness because, of course, we're badass teenagers and we don't need no light. I wish we had had one. Sid mentions she hears something moving. Net and I quiet down and listen, and sure enough, something was snapping the brittle twigs up the embankment in front of us. If you grew up knowing what deer or other animals sound like moving through the undergrowth, you'd be able to recognize it. This was different. This was wrong. And we were able to hear sounded like a bipedal being moving across the bank. The thudding of the footfalls was frightening as all hell because it sounded like someone in heavy boots intentionally stomping with every step. Sid and Ned, the brave creek wanderers they were, hid behind me as though I would be able to do anything against whatever it was that was out there. Looking back on it, I'm a little mad about it. Anyway, we were standing there, stock still in ankle-deep freezing water for what felt like hours, just listening to this thing moving around. It couldn't have been more than 5 or 10 minutes, and we listened to this progression from our far right to right in front of us, when my friends decide to use me as a meat shield, and then off to our left. Eventually, after the noise tapered off, we scurried back up the side of the embankment to head towards home. As we made our way down the small slope into the trail, we ran between 2 large open fields. We heard a piercing shriek that sounded inhuman, but nothing like anything I'd heard before in those woods. It was like the scream of a cougar mixed with the chattering of some angry, riled-up bird. There are no cougars, at least not in the northwest Tennessee. We froze for a moment to figure out where the sound was coming from, and we heard that sound of heavy stomping against the hard dirt, moving very fast. In the dull moonlight, we see in the field to our right this weird thing. I don't know how to describe it. It looked like a person, but it was wrong. The stance it had and the noises it was making. It was hard to see due to the darkness. It looked like a tall, hunched-over bald person with abnormally long arms. It really did sound like the aliens from the movie Signs, the weird clicking noises they made, only louder and more distorted like old VHS tapes. It almost made me sick, and I remember feeling utterly helpless and terrified, especially since Signs freaked me the fuck out and it was just a movie. Needless to say, all three of us booked it back to my house immediately. I'm not sure if either of my friends paused to look back and see if it was following us, but I surely didn't. I kept my eyes locked on home. We never really talked about it after that night. Both of my friends saw and heard it, supposedly, anyway, so I don't think it was my imagination. Something was out there with us that night, but I definitely wasn't about to poke my nose around and try to find out what. It took me a while to go back to that creek, and I never again did I visit at night. During the day, it felt fine. I loved it. It was teeming with life and energy. I remember hearing odd screams down that way, every so often after that, but I tried to chalk it up to animals fighting. Even if deep down, I knew it was something a little more sinister. That's probably one of the weird ones, if not the worst. Hearing something or thinking you can see something is one thing, but actually seeing it and having a shared experience with two other people, that's a whole different game. I kept my windows locked tight after that, and would often flip the outside lights on at random, just to have a reassuring look around the house. I never saw it again. I used to live out in the country, way back almost to the end of a dead-end road. There were only 2 houses that were actually lived in that far down. My dad's and the old lady at the very end of the road. That's my dad's house. And around it, kind of off to the side, were a bunch of old, medium-sized barns and sheds. I used to let my cat out sometimes, and she would roam around the yard, come back up and pull out my window when she was ready to come in. One night, I had done just that, but after a long while, I got a little concerned. She usually only stayed out for an hour, 2 tops, but it had been way longer. I decided to go out and get her. I go out through the side door on the house and immediately felt off, like something was there. I needed to get my cat, though, and if something was there, I chalked it up to a raccoon or other critter. I grabbed the mag light and set off for the barns, calling for my cat. I found her huddled up in one of the barns. She did not want to leave. It was like she was terrified of something, and was very stiff when I picked her up. I hadn't taken 1 but 2 or 3 steps when this light shoots across the sky directly over me, illuminating everything almost like lightning. It made this odd whoom sound as it passed. My cat freaked out and started growling and clawing at me, which she never does. I actually dropped her because of it, and she took off toward the house, as though she were running for her life. I did the same. I've never figured out what that was. I've read about comets and things like that, but nothing says anything about the odd noise I heard, or the reaction my cat had. It couldn't have been something simple and explainable, but man, did it freak me out that time. I had a span of time where multiple things happened to me. Not much since. I'm in college now, but here it goes. Here are a few stories. Some are related, and all happened at the same house. When I was in 6th grade, my friend was over at my house, and we were taking turns playing the PlayStation. I was lying on my bed, and it was his turn. The lights were out, and it was about midnight at this time. As I'm laying there, I notice from my left peripheral that there is someone there. I see a face, all white face, with blacked out eyes, and quite similar to what Michael Myers' mask looks like, but no hair. This face started to slowly turn in and look at me, getting closer and closer. I jump up quickly and turn the light on, and there was nothing. I was freaked out for the rest of that night. A few years later, I believe I was in high school. I was playing Xbox, and my mom was sitting on the computer. I was playing Call of Duty Zombies, and she was playing a dice game, so I can be certain this wasn't from that. Both of us heard this very loud man say, "I'm home." So I'm home, but dragged out. We both just looked at each other, wondering what the hell just happened. Later that night, my mom was in her room, just petting one of our cats. As she was petting him, she was saying, "Hi, Vady." His name is Vader. After she said this, she said that someone mimicked her voice. Hi, almost as if she was being mocked. A few months later, once Halloween approached, we had seen something else. We had our house all decorated and looked pretty scary. Scary enough that I decided to use my uncle's camera to take pictures of our house. Upon further inspection of the picture, I noticed something quite scary. I zoomed in on our door. We have a glass door that opens first before the main door, and saw within the glass a face. It had human characteristics, however the eyes were blacked out, very similar to the thing I saw when I was younger. This is going to be a bit out there for most people, but what I'm about to type out is true and actually happened to me. If you choose not to believe me, that's fine. I wouldn't expect you to. Just don't be a dick about it. This all happened around late May to early June 2017. I lived out in Kentucky and have been here my whole life. I saved up some money and bought my first AR-style rifle, a Ruger AR-556, for anyone who cares. I had wanted one for a while, but never had the money to get one, so as soon as I got the chance, I grabbed it. I needed to sight in my gun after I bought it. My family owns 20-plus acres of land, so I don't go to gun ranges around here, because first of all, people are dumb, and our local one has bullet holes in the ceilings, and second, I prefer shooting on our own land. I had managed to get a Magpul D60 drum magazine at Gander Mountain because we were having a going out of business sale. So I guess really I was going to sight in the gun and test out the magazine's reliability. I barely had the magazine out of the box and had not gotten a chance to shoot it yet, but I looked up a bunch of reviews and can never find one that had a problem mine did that day. This is where things start getting a bit odd. My family has owned this land and I shot on it for a decade. Nothing weird has ever happened out here that I know of. And I've taken people to the spot this happened and nothing has recreated the feelings I had that day. I grabbed my gun, the drum, and the 20 rounds of ammo and went outside to cross over a field. To get to the field, I have to go through a barbed wire fence and about a 300-foot wooded area. The moment I crossed over the barbed wire, something felt off. I've been over there for 1,000 times before, and like I said, nothing weird had ever happened down there. And I've never had any weird experiences there. Something just felt off that day. Something just wanted me to leave. I kept going, though, because nothing had ever happened out here before. I just thought maybe I was being paranoid, or the wind or the air pressure were just right to give me an eerie feeling. So I walked on, deeper into the woods. The further I get, the stronger the feeling is. I feel like I'm being watched, like something nearby is just staring into my soul. I keep going. I get halfway and this feeling is borderline unbearable. I stop dead in my tracks and think to myself, something is off. Like I've said 1,000 times, nothing like this has ever happened before. I know something is going on now. When I grabbed my ammo when I left home, I did not load it into the magazine because I wanted to hurry and get into the field so I could get everything set up. This is where I listened to that gut feeling. I stopped dead in my tracks and loaded the magazine with the 20 rounds I brought. Something told me that something wasn't right and I needed to be ready just in case. Something is watching me, and I don't know what or where it is. As I'm loading my magazine, out of nowhere, I smell something dead. It just came out of nowhere. I had been standing there for 2 minutes with no scent. Then all of a sudden, it smells like month-old rotting carcass behind me. I look around, and directly behind me is a mangled animal. That, aside from the smell, looks nearly fresh. It was so mangled, the only thing that gave me a clue as to what the animal was the color of what was left of its fur, which was white and gray color. It was a rabbit or possum. The smell did not go along with the age of this. Whatever I caught the stench of, that wasn't it. I finished loading up the magazine, immediately stuck it in my gun, and held the bolt open. That way, if I tripped, my gun wouldn't fire accidentally. For some reason, I kept fucking going. I'm nearly out of the woods. I can see the field. I'm going to go dead ahead. Then when it happened, this entire time, I've been walking alongside a creek. The creek to the left as you approach the field I was going to. As I got to turn into the creek, I heard a large splash in the water. I turned quickly, and what I seen I'll never forget. This thing was easily 8 or 9 feet, stood on 2 legs. Aside from the water splash, it was dead silent. It had very long arms and long legs. It was light brown in color, almost the color of a deer. Update. This to say, I think I was thinking about it the other day. I think it was a much lighter brown than a deer. It still had a brownish look to it, but not that dark. Maybe it was actually grayer, lighter than a deer, making it look like a light shaded brown. But it looked like skin, not fur. Perhaps the funkiest thing about it was its size. It looked extremely malnourished, very skinny and tight skin across its entire body. Imagine taking a fully grown man that only weighs 120 pounds and stretching him out to be 9 feet tall, but he stands the same width and doesn't get skinnier as you stretch it out. It had somewhat of an odd walk too, but this could have been caused by the mud near the creek bed. It never faced me, so I did not get a chance to see its front. It just kept walking and never turned around. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I was 99% sure I knew what this thing was. I tried to close the bolt on my gun to chamber around just in case this thing turned around to fight. I had no intention of shooting this thing unless it gave a sign it was going to attack. If it was what I hunk it was, the gun wouldn't have done anything but piss it off anyway. When I tried to chamber around, the magazine would not let go of the round. The force of the bolt closing would break your finger if you went to close it in on your finger. I had been loading and unloading the magazine the day before to help loosen the spring to make it easier to load in the future. I could take the rounds out with my hand, but when I come across the fucking thing, somehow it decides it wants to keep the fucking bullet. By now, the thing is gone, and I'm basically sitting there with my dick in my hand. That magazine never worked right again. I kept it for a few more days, but had it sent back because it was tearing up my ammo. I would hold on to bullets so tight, the bolt tried to close and just scratched a gauge so deep in the casing, powder was almost leaking out. After it walked off, I realized if I had shot, I would have deafened myself. It caught me so off guard that I almost fired a 5.56 round in a heavily wooded area without ear protection. I had brought some with me, but didn't have it on. Now to answer some questions. What was it? To be honest, I have no fucking clue what it actually was. Me and a friend, who knows more about this stuff than I do, did some looking around and have narrowed it down. Skinwalker, goat man, or what I'm afraid it is, a Wendigo. If you want a very good idea of what it looked like, look up the Wendigo from the game Until Dawn. Aside from the color, it is exactly what I saw. And before anyone thinks I'm just describing the one from the game, I didn't even know about that game until I had my encounter. When I seen the gameplay, It actually made me very uncomfortable because of how much it resembled what I saw. Everything I seen matched a Wendigo perfectly. Stench of death, mangled animals, scare and intimidate humans, long arms, malnourished, tight skin. Most are gray, but I've heard about brown ones. Except one thing, its behavior. They're supposed to be hyper-aggressive and basically kill anything they see and drag it off and eat it alive. So why didn't it get me? It had ample opportunity, but never did. Why did it walk off and turn its back toward me? I've not told my family, mainly because I do not think that they will believe me. They will think I'm crazy. I think my dad could have possibly seen it, or someone else at one point too. Before I seen it, out of nowhere, he started burning sage around the house, saying that he liked the smell, even though he has never said he liked it before and has never burned in here before. Now for some info about the land. In case anyone didn't know, the Wendigo is a Native American legend. They are human who resorted to cannibalism, and a Wendigo spirit took them over after they ate and turned them into this monster. I live in Kentucky. There were and still are Native Americans here. I find a flint every year on my family's land, the same land I seen it on, and on occasion an arrowhead. They were definitely on my family's land. My mom has a lot of Native American blood in her, so that means I have some too. And now for the most important part of this story. Me and a friend, who I've told this story, just realized 2 weeks ago. There is a trail of tears, slightly less than 5 miles away. I just checked, it's actually just over 2 miles away. From my doorstep, it is entirely possible that this thing could have came from that. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'll answer best I can. Also, if anyone has any info that could help me determine what it was for sure or how to tell if it's still around, I'd appreciate it. It's been almost a year and haven't seen it again. So one night, I wake up around 2:50 and I hear rigorous typing coming from across the room where my computer keyboard is. They are really pounding on it, loud enough to wake me, and they're going at it sporadically in a way that keeps making me think it's ended. But it resumes at an intermittent interval. Like whoever is pounding on my keyboard is doing it with some intent or purpose. So I lean forward to take a look to see who snuck into my room, thinking it's my brother. I thought I'd see the light of a monitor showing them clear as day, but the monitor is off, and the little bit of light left in the room isn't enough to reveal anything. I call out, "Is someone in my room?" The typing stops a moment, then carries on like usual, no answer. The pause made me think my brother was trying to hide their presence. But then I realized my brother is away. I'm in the house alone. My brain went into overdrive. An animal snuck in? I have no pets. A break and entry? Why would they be typing in the dark? So a ghost? After a life of disbelief, this hit me in the face like a ton of bricks. I've seen plenty of explanations for all sort of ghost phenomenon, but this was beyond the pale. Loud, clear, intentional, and unexplainable. I jumped out of bed and just ran for the door. I hesitated a moment, thinking whether I should flip the lights, but instead I stepped into the hallway. Glancing at the other rooms, everyone else was definitely out tonight, and nothing else looked out of place. After a quick stop in the bathroom so I didn't piss myself, I head back to my room. I reach in to flip the light switch before I head into the now lit room. I listen and the typing is still going. Pushing open the door slowly, I see nothing. I look towards the keyboard, and even as typing keeps going, I see nothing in my computer chair but the pair of headphones I left there. Nothing had moved. My keyboard was even in the same awkward position I always left it in after resting on my lap. I step right up to take a look at the keyboard. There are no keys moving, but the noises keep going. Listening closer, I notice the sound isn't coming from my keyboard, but just past it, between the wall and my chair. There lies 2 plastic pastry containers, randomly vibrating against each other. The wall and chair bang together to make a sound that uncannily like the sound of someone banging on a keyboard. I picked my headphones up to take a closer look, and it stops. I'd left some ambient VGM playing that I was planning on listening to while I fell asleep, so the music was resonating with my chair in such a way that rattled some boxes next to it. I put my headphones back down, and the boxes gave one last rattle before stopping for good. I'd have never guessed it if the evidence wasn't staring me in the face. Flipping on my monitor, I looked to see what song had been playing, but it just changed and the playlist was on shuffle. My best guess is Transistor OST, Vanishing Point, since it's the only thing on an ambient list that has the punchiest to shake a chair. Finally looking at the clock, I saw it was 2:55 a.m. I had work in the morning and the playlist did its original job, helping me get back to sleep after my spooking. So I've actually had two family members experience the hag. The first was my great aunt who passed away from melanoma a few years ago. This isn't a sleep paralysis story, but I'm getting there. My great uncle found her standing in the middle of the living room, and she refused to walk past a certain spot to get to the washroom. She was terrified because she said there was an old hag standing beside the armchair, and she didn't want to get any closer. My great uncle couldn't see it, but she was adamant. She kept saying that the hag wanted her to come with her. She kept beckoning her. She described her as an old witch with no face. This happened only a few months before my great aunt passed away. Now I have a great uncle on the other side of the family who was very interested to hear this story. He said that he had seen an old hag multiple times as well, and this time it was actually sleep paralysis. There were multiple times throughout the years where he would wake up with sleep paralysis and see the witch standing in his bedroom or hovering over him. I don't know if he said whether or not she had a face, but he did say she had black wispy rags of cloth for clothing. He said that he had seen her so many times that he started trying to shout, "Who are you? And what do you want?" But she never responded. Then one night he had a girlfriend staying over. He was asleep, and she had gotten up to go to the washroom. When she came back, she started screaming and woke him. She said that she had seen an old hag hovering over him, and she disappeared when she screamed. After this happened, he started doing research and learned that other people experienced this as well. It's easy to explain this away as a simple hallucination, which is common with sleep paralysis. What is harder to explain is why so many people have the same hallucination, and why his girlfriend saw this hag when she was fully awake and lucid. When I was 15, I was having frequent sleep paralysis episodes nearly every night for a year. I finally decided to tell my doctor, and she referred to me to a sleep specialist. They glued and taped many wires onto my head and chest for a device, and had to sleep in a room with a camera watching me. The camera was to observe any bodily movements, and the device told them when I was dreaming, experiencing sleep paralysis, breathing, and so on. My mom decided to sleep in a recliner in the same room as me for every study. The nurses were recording all the information while the doctor would be gone for the next week. I remember waking up during one study and I couldn't move while someone with a deep, soothing voice was talking to me. I look over to the side of my bed and it's a doctor. He's been very gentle and he's making small talk while I struggle to get my movement back. He's wearing glasses and he has a surgical mask on. I remember he put his hand under my shirt and my chest and told me, "It's okay. I know you can't move, just relax." This goes on for about a minute, which is longer than my normal episodes, so I decide I'm at his mercy and need my movement back ASAP. I close my eyes to go to sleep so I can wake up. I woke up to the nurse turning the light on in the room and asking if I want anything to eat. I ignored her question and asked if there was a doctor that came into my room. She said he still will not be there for a while, and that I was not dreaming, having paralysis or anything that time I slept, telling me that it was a normal sleep cycle. To this day, I wonder what the hell happened.